Good morning and welcome to Talking Point here on WESN, the content capital. My name is Keaton Shaw. If you're able to be viewing this program this morning, consider yourself fortunate, as last night an act of God, or let me stress, another act of God, caused a power outage to roughly 30% of Trinidad and Tobago. How many more of these acts of gods are going to occur? Well, I guess it's up to the man above or the Minister of Public Utilities to tell us. Now, alongside us this morning is my sitting/standing, how you'd like to put it. He is my co-host here on Talking Point, Mr. Kemuel Pascal. Good morning, Kemuel.
Good morning, Keaton, and good morning, Trinidad and Tobago. It's a pleasure to be here once again on this fine Thursday morning. As you said, you must count yourself lucky that you're actually able to view us this morning, considering that TNTech is saying that we can still expect power outages.
Yes, again, interesting what happened. According to reports from TNTech, a major landslide near Rusalak caused a power outage, which affected their grid. Of course, expect power outages, as Kemuel would have repeated, throughout the day as they continue to repair any damage done and give us back full service from the disruptions. But also with us this morning, via Zoom. She's smiling, she's happy, she's very, very happy to be here, and we're happy to have her. Former Minister of Finance and Attorney at Law, my good friend, Ms. Karen Nunes Teixeira. Good morning, Karen.
Good morning to you, Keaton, and I'm sorry if the lighting isn't the best, but as I explained to you that I'm not in the country, and unfortunately where I am, the lighting is not the best, but I'm always happy to be with you, and sorry that Sean is not with us this morning. And I just saw you introduce your new co-host for another few weeks, Youth Parliamentary Representative. So happy to be part of the young people.
Karen, you're one of us.
Thank you. I feel so. I do. Actually, I should tell you, Keaton, many times I meet people, and one of the things they do say, I've said it to Sean, and I would say it now, that many and older people and of different age groups really do admire your show and admire the interaction between yourself and Sean. They think that you bring value. So I'm giving in a WhatsApp. I am just a visitor, so I think I can say that.
Well, Karen, thank you, and we always appreciate our viewers and their feedback. But yesterday, Karen, you and I had a brief conversation as to many things. I mean, the only unfortunate thing is because you're with us once a week, there's so much usually to cover. But we chose 3 specific topics this morning, the first one of which we'll get into now, and that is all the different sides to the wage negotiations and the trade union movement here in Trinidad and Tobago. And last week, Friday, thousands came out to protest. I'm not entirely sure if I would refer to that as a protest. It actually looked like a Carnival Monday.
Like a fete?
Yeah, just without the costumes. But I suppose given our nature here in Trinidad and Tobago, anything is an excuse to party, to fete, to jam. But this terminology, rest and reflect, has once more resurfaced. I mean, I remember as a little boy constantly hearing that on television when it came to the union movement, and I'm hearing it once more. So, Kemuel, first of all, the trade union movement, many sides to this argument. You have them making the argument that, listen, 4% is not enough. Some of us are working on salaries from as far back as 2007. We've seen a windfall from oil and gas revenues, which, by the way, is about to change, given that oil has actually dropped below, as we mentioned yesterday, to pre-invasion levels. And yet still, it took, in my opinion, it took a twist that should have never been touched. And that seems to be a slight hint of a racial conversation. I don't want to get too much into that, but I raised it because, as I said, there are many sides to this argument.
Yes, there are certainly many sides to the argument. In fact, over the weekend, the Prime Minister would have posted something to his Facebook page where he would have basically slammed Mr. Anisette for his comments during the march on Friday. And as you mentioned, the term rest and reflect has once more resurfaced based on the fact that the unions are calling for more than 4%, and they intend to do that by literally resting and reflecting, not going to work, basically saying, here's what you all don't want to offer anymore. We are prepared to drop the tools for the day and basically wait for you all to give us more than 4%. And
you wonder how long this is going to go on for, because one union leader, Leo Ramke, soon head of the Fire Services Association, was speaking yesterday very impassioned about what's transpiring. And then we heard another union leader stating that he doesn't think it'll go beyond 2023. Those arguments have all been brought forward, but interestingly enough, the offer of 4% is on the table. It's been on the table, I think, at least for 2 weeks. The government seems to not be shifting from that offer at all. Or let me say specifically, the Prime Minister said the CPO, who is the employer of all members of the public service.
Well, that's what they've offered, I think, about 3 weeks now. So it's a matter of us waiting to see if they will offer more. In fact, the Fire Services Association said they would have made a counter proposal. I believe the PSA did the same thing, and also the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service Social and Welfare Association. So it's certainly a waiting game. The Prime Minister have stated very, very clearly that they really can't offer more, but the people are calling for more than 4%.
Well, Karen, as a former Minister of Finance, I mean, you would probably analyze this to a greater extent than we do. You know, especially knowing that you were in this position before. The government has stated that we actually cannot afford more than 4%. The unions are refuting that and stating, listen, we've seen where you've spent your money. It's been years since we've actually been to the negotiation table. 3 periods have actually passed. Your offer does not stand. What are your thoughts on the 4% offer and what the unions, their counter proposals to the 4%?
Yes, so it's a difficult situation in that when you're talking about increasing the salaries of the union employees, which one can very well understand that because of the inflation, and inflation being led, when you take out of the headline inflation, you take out the main drivers, it's food for us more than energy prices, but it's definitely food. And as the central bank governor said, we import $5 billion worth of our food, and maybe it has dropped, but it was until recently 80% of our food was imported. And when countries like Sri Lanka, as I've mentioned before, and other countries, Lebanon and so on, in the state that they find themselves, a lot has to do with their lack of foreign exchange to buy food or the fertilizers which we produce in the Point Lisa's industrial estate. So when this government came in end of 2015, one of the major concerns, and understandably so, was that whatever money we had, whatever revenue the government had to go towards recurrent expenditure, and that is what salaries are. Salaries are recurrent expenditure, and that doesn't allow you to build and create capital projects and create products that will produce foreign exchange for the country. So it's also can feed into the inflation. You already have a high inflation rate with the food, which everyone has to eat. You already have that. And so the concern may be that when you pay higher salaries, I'm just taking it now from not a humanist point of view, but I guess from an economist or the government point of view, when you pay the higher salaries, what you're doing then, there's more disposable income. If there's more disposable income, in one sense, yes, it does help by allowing people to spend money, and has that domino effect that a lot of businesses that have suffered, especially small businesses, can now resuscitate because they have customers. So from one sense, yes, it is good. But on another sense, having increased salaries can also feed into inflationary trends. And one of the things that affects the stability of any economy is when you have inflation and high unemployment. And I know that we've spoken about this on many occasions, that unemployment level is not a living wage employment. It's very misleading, actually, to say that to let, in terms of seeing the unemployment rate is 4% or 5% or whatever it's now, it certainly is misleading because so many of the people who are called employed are not getting a living wage. So it is a difficult position. The government itself, one of the things I would say in response to that, among the other things, is this. This government has been in office for 7 years, and it's made up of this leadership persons who have been cabinet ministers in other iterations of this administration. So they should have been well versed and prepared. You should have been prepared. That is what government is about: being strategic and looking up down the line. And what they have failed to do is to provide other avenues of production and foreign exchange, other than relying on energy, so that when they are faced with this increase in revenue, it has nothing to do with increasing productive capacity or increasing areas of production, because in fact the national gas company, although they loaded their huge profit, when you read the article, the expected production from natural gas, which is really where we depend on, was not what they expected. It is the prices.
Yes.
So if you're so susceptible to external forces, this recurring expenditure that will increase because of the salaries, and on the other hand, inflation because of supply chain issues and Ukraine war and China and Taiwan and all those issues, it is a difficult situation to because once the government workers get the increase, it's going to travel right across into the private sector. So it's not an easy situation to resolve.
Well, Karen, you've raised some valuable points there. What we're going to do on the program is that we're going to take a quick commercial break now. But when we return, we're going to expand on those points even more, because you're right.
Yeah.
The main issue is that, first of all, the government has never been proactive. That's a huge issue in this entire situation, because 3 bargaining periods have gone. It's now an interesting time to be negotiating salary increases. It's a very, very interesting time. And that is the consequence of the delay in negotiations. And furthermore, the government is fearful because, yes, our production levels have dropped, and recurrent expenditure is going to increase should they give in to the union demands. 4% alone is an increase in recurrent expenditure. But it's a very, very interesting time. So we'll expand on those points when we return to Talking Point here on WESN, the Content Capital.
Delivered nationwide. Kiss enriched bread.
Fill your day with love.
Welcome to the American University of Barbados School of Medicine. We offer 2 comprehensive MD programs, 5.5-year program for high school finishers, and 4-year program for college graduates.
The American University of Barbados has been accredited with the Barbados Accreditation Council, BAC, and has been accredited
by CAMHP.
as the medical school has affiliate hospitals at Baltimore and Chicago in the USA and the Caribbean islands.
Don't miss us in TNT in Tobago, Mount Irvin Bay Resort, August 12th and 13th. In Trinidad, Trade Winds Hotel San Fernando, August 14th and 15th. And K-Poc Hotel, Maraval, August 16th and 17th.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
Well, there are many angles that you can look at when analyzing the situation, because I think we've all understood the position of the unions given the current economic climate and given all the inflationary pressures associated with such. I mean, even the United States, their fears of recession, the United Kingdom, they're predicting recession by the end of the year. So bear in mind, a small island developing state, a third world nation, what could we expect? Now, I do also, and I'll be very honest with you, to a certain extent, I can't stress on that enough, a certain extent, understand the government's position, but they too have a lot to blame in this situation. Camille, that is why I said before we cut to a commercial break, it's an interesting time. 3 bargaining periods have gone. With all that is taking place now, you can't help but wonder, had this been done sooner, if the government was in a better position in terms of budgeting, in terms of financing, and predicting where the economic climate is heading to, specifically for Trinidad and Tobago?
Well, you do have to recall, and I think that's precisely what I would have liked to ask Karen. What are her thoughts on had the government done this before or negotiated during those periods, if we would have been in a better position financially in terms of being able to pay this off, or at least kick the can down the road somewhat and probably look at different avenues of offering the public servants money. But she would have mentioned quite a number of things there before we went to the break, and you do have to recall the fact that there was a kind of quote-unquote wage freeze that was offered by the Minister of Finance before 2020, and there was also there's also a matter of they had put a stop on hiring public servants for a year, which has since elapsed. But there are quite a number of things in there. So, Karen, I'd like to ask you, what are your thoughts on whether or not the government negotiated during or immediately after those periods? Would they have been in a better position to pay public servants, or at least offer another avenue in terms of how they would pay them?
Okay, so traditionally, not only in the public sector, but the private sector, you usually find that when a collective agreement is settled, that's why I talk about back pay, because by the time, this is across the board, by the time the 3-year period of the collective agreement has elapsed, you have not negotiated the one that should come immediately after. In fact, the one that comes afterwards is probably after the second negotiating period has ended, which is why all the terms and conditions that would have applied, except the increase in salaries, that's what you really fight, because you don't want to decrease in, you won't be reducing the benefits you have, but you're looking at salaries. So the fact that there were 3 periods passing is not unusual for the public sector, it's not unusual industrial relations. Would it have made a difference? I'm not really sure, because the issue here is not the issue here really is the ability of the government to be using the revenue that it has obtained for recurrent expenditure. We look at the THA situation. I was very shocked when I read it that only 18 million, after you pay salaries and so on, only 18 million is left for capital expenditure. So I don't know so much delaying the negotiating periods is as detrimental because we also had a COVID-19, and I think people very well understood, at least if you were a public servant, to be frank, a lot of people were losing their jobs, and the persons who weren't were public servants. So I don't think they wanted to make too much of a hullabaloo then. And also, to be fair to the government, it also did cut drastically its own expenditure. The problem, so to answer your question, I think the issue really is the government's lack of strategic vision, lack of implementation, and understanding two things: that oil prices have their highs and lows. Usually it's geopolitical issues that affect our oil and gas prices. We are not a price maker by no means. So we are very well aware that of the up and down of energy prices, which will affect the government's revenue. So the fact that you continue to allow the country to be so dependent on one source, which is the energy, to pay bills, to pay salaries, to pay state enterprises, to pay private public sector, means you're being very short-sighted, because you could have used that time to go into other productive, like steel. Steel prices on the world market are phenomenal. So that there were opportunities missed, agro-industry, to become more food secure. So the problem with the government, I think, is although it has got this huge largesse, this largesse of money is not as a result of productive capacity or introducing new productive streams. It is directly related to oil and gas prices. And when those oil and gas prices collapse, as oil is already doing, oil is already falling, but every day it's so volatile. Every day is a new day in the geopolitical theater. So when you are so dependent on one product, on one thing, you are going to find that no union is going to agree for less. They are going to ask for more, and they're going to say, it's how many years we held our belt, COVID-19, okay, we understood, but we are past COVID-19, you got a lot of money. But the problem is that all that money going to go to recurrent expenditure and not to develop productive capacity? And this is where the government could have used loans, could have used a number of strategies so that we wouldn't find ourselves. So it's hard in a way to empathize with the government, because to some extent I think they were very short-sighted. When they came in, that was their big point, that they came in with a $5 billion, I think it was, public servant negotiated salary that had been done by the former government, and they had to honor it, and that affected their ability to do anything. Well, didn't you know that when you came in 7 years ago? What stopped you? So, and because I know we're going to have to change points, so I hope I answered your question. I'm really saying that it's really not about how many times they missed, because that is common in even the private sector. It's the problem is that what you have gotten is not a result of increasing productivity. If you use, instead of using GDP, use real GDP, then you will know that that money, that the revenue has not come from productivity, but it has come from oil and gas. So that's a big criticism of the government, and its short-sightedness in not going into other avenues so that it would not find itself in a position where we have money, yes, but all that money is, you want us to spend it on recurrent expenditure. Well, they knew that was going to happen. And the second point, which maybe I'll stop and just mention it, because it was, I don't know if it was discussed before, that whole thing about women and children.
Yes, yeah. Well, that's exactly
take that up, Keaton.
That's exactly what we were going to get into now. We have about 10 minutes left for this particular point, and it's not only about women and children. And this is the thing. I'm honestly, I'm a bit saddened that we actually have to get into this point, but it's now become part of the argument. And we heard from the trade union movement, the General Secretary of NATF, Michael Anisset. He was essentially alluding to the fact that, well, I'll quote directly from him very shortly, as I find that quote very shortly But it took a very nasty side, I think, because the Prime Minister has every right. Here's the quote. Black Afro-Trinidadians, people, we strong. The ruling People's National Movement will pay the price. We not taking 4%. We go back to the ancestors, to Africa for spiritual guidance. Now, usually nothing is entirely wrong with it, but as a union leader, highlighting specifically one group, it's unfortunate, and I think it's uncalled for. The comments about women and children, to a certain extent, I understand. Communication is an issue, and the Prime Minister has every right to respond. Don't get me wrong, I think any leader in any position or anybody has every right to respond to accusations or allegations made against them. The downfall on the part of the Prime Minister, at least my criticism, Camille, is that when you choose to speak specifically or pinpoint certain things from a wider argument, whilst you remain silent most of the time, or if you go on a political platform and then choose to speak about the union movement, this is where your downfall lies. You cannot just choose to respond to what you want to respond to.
And that's essentially it. You have a broad issue, you have an entire topic, and a specific thing is targeted, and you lost sense of the entire thing. And that's what we found ourselves in discussing right now. The Prime Minister would have pinpointed this particular thing about what Michael Anisette said in terms of women and children, and now the MSGA leader would have also responded to say the Prime Minister is essentially attempting to change narrative, and that's what we continue to have. So we lose track of, or we lose sight of the main issue, and we now stray onto something else.
Well, we actually do have a photo of that tweet from the leader of the Movement for Social Justice. That will be on your screen. You can take a look at it. Karen, Prime Minister Dr. Rowley is trying to change the narrative. He must not get away with it. Deal with the issues, workers losing their jobs, no wage increase for 9 years, people can't make it from payday to payday, food prices skyrocketing, fuel prices went up, people are in pain. Now, I think essentially we've covered the majority of this morning that David Abdullah is highlighting. However, his response to the Prime Minister's tweet with respect to the Prime Minister actually looking for a distraction away from the main points, away from the main arguments, which again I do understand. Do you agree with that?
Okay, so the first point I would want to make is unions are known, because that's the reputation, is not that they are leaders of the government. They're not prime ministers, they're not ministers. I'm not making excuses, but I don't think that unions and union leaders, especially when their followers are looking at them and saying, what happened? You're not fighting for our rights. So part of it is a lot of theater. And secondly, I think when Michael Anisette specifically mentioned the issue of women and children, he was giving a pot shot at the Prime Minister. And there was, in fact, some justification, if I want to say. For example, when they had the whole issue of domestic violence, as a Prime Minister, I can't tell you who to have in your bed. You're Prime Minister, and you're saying that?
Yeah.
And they're dealing with domestic violence? So you said that, that's one. Secondly, then giving advice about how you must manage your wife, or your woman, you must mow the lawn, you must do something, you must, that's our discussion for Prime Minister. Another time, he talked about something about buying his wife's underwear. I mean, I'm sorry. He looked for a lot of the criticism because he went down he descended into the arena as a Prime Minister by being so vulgar and crass. And you see, once you open the door like that, you open the door as a leader in any organization. Once you start having those kinds of things, you then allow, in effect, for that kind of responsiveness to you. On the issue of the children, we have the Hadid report that's been buried for ever so long, and you have the Minister
Judy Jones.
I don't know, Judy Jones report
Jones, yeah,
that you had on your desk for nearly a year, said nothing, did nothing about the Hadid report, and then you're now jumping into action because you're being exposed. So if he says that you show that you don't care about children, well, there is evidence, actual evidence. One, in relation to children, with the whole children's, all those children's homes, and apparently doing nothing, not passing legislation to protect these children. So they have a point with that. And with regard to the woman, I mean, he's given the Prime Minister a dig, it is true, but it's also the Prime Minister himself, by his own vulgar language, and he has opened himself up to that. And thirdly, as a Prime Minister, you do not descend into that. It's not the arena, it's down into the Gael. You do not go down that road. You stick to the point. We are, as a government, dealing with the issue of the impact of you not having gotten an increase in salary, inflationary trends, which is happening all over the world. America is battling with it. England is battling with it. We understand your concern, and the government has electricity, water. Whilst that is not, then there are many ways in which the government, many people may criticize our government for subsidizing many things that are far more expensive in so-called first world countries. But we are working with you, but you have to understand that what we are looking at is an inflationary trend that can erode any thing. So we've got to find, sit around that table to find solutions that perhaps maybe the bonds, maybe the NIF bonds, maybe an increase, some sort of negotiation, but to go down to answer him on your Facebook page shows that you are very vulnerable. You have little self-control, because how many politicians, including myself, have been criticized? You don't go back and answer because you're showing yourself, you're showing your vulnerability. And it is so unbecoming of a Prime Minister, unbecoming of him to descend into the guy like that. So in my answer to that is that Anisette is being, if Anisette does not talk out and say what he's saying, you know what they're going to say? You know, union leader, you know. You just playing to the government buy you out. You sitting down there in a corner and taking all that. So he has to do what he has to do. He and Anisette may be friends. But after that comment about women and children, it hurt him. Yes. And he responded, which he should never have done as a Prime Minister. Go stand above that. Stand above that and deal with the issues.
I think overall, Kemuel and Karen, Kemuel, Karen, and Keaton. Oh, look at that. But, you know,
KKK.
So, come on, Karen. Yeah, I was thinking it, and I did not say it. But I agree, as I stated before, every individual has, they do have the opportunity to respond. Given that fact, the Prime Minister has any opportunity to respond to allegations and accusations made against him, any comments, but you can't just pick and choose when you want to. And everything that you've mentioned, right, because we have to take a commercial break now, but everything that you mentioned, the first thing that came to my mind is, where's the PNM Women's League? You know, again, we're speaking about wage negotiations, but I have to bring that up, given how they themselves have been so, they're very picky, the PNM Women's League. I'm surprised they actually didn't release a comment defending the Prime Minister. As yet. They actually just copied the Prime Minister's social media post from Facebook. They reposted it, but they never...
Can I give you a word? Wind and fury saying nothing. That's their problem. They only take a lot of verbiage, a lot of adjectives that said, when you drill it down to the essence of what they've said nothing, which is why they're just staying quiet.
Well, I think it's best that they do, actually. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, we now have to take a commercial break here on Talking Point. When we return, well, we'll take another look at wage negotiations, but from a different angle, because throughout the years, as companies have absorbed more and more bills without being profitable, and the companies bloated in terms of their labor force, well, guess what? Something called VSEP has cost taxpayers billions of dollars over the years. We'll analyze that after this.
Bills bills here. Got phone bill, light bill, and a plane ticket. Where this ticket come from? Who flying here? And look, the roof leaking now.
It sounds like you need a loan from Eastern Credit Union during the Dobita promotion.
But who is you?
A lot of questions you're asking. You can get a loan for mortgage, home equity, debt consolidation, and a Georgie bundle. You know it's a Georgie bundle? Like everything in one. You can also get a chance to win up to $30,000 in prizes.
But there's my robe.
Focus, Daryl. He's sounding like you know what he's talking about. Eastern Credit Union have us covered. I done talk.
And this promotion running until August 30th. You need to go down there right now.
But why you have my toothbrush?
You still asking another question. We will be here when you come back. Go down there, let me fix the roof. And they can probably get a new bed. The bed doesn't making a lot of noise. So go down the road, Eastern Credit Union.
But how you know about my bed?
Don't beat up, Darrell. Hurry up, hurry up. Don't beat up. We will be here.
So, tell me more about this Dobita promotion.
Well,
with society plagued by a host of issues, with debates surrounding our urgent concerns falling short, with questions of our future not always being answered.
The conversation continues. Join me, Kemuel Pascal, as the voice of the youth comes to life. We will confront the controversial topics of today's world to gain answers that are key for a better tomorrow. One and One with me, Kemuel Pascal. Wednesdays at 10 a.m. Only on WESN, Content Capital.
Let your voice be heard. Call Madam Fix It on WESN, the only place that effectively helps you with your woes. Having problems getting onto government agencies, water woes, NIS and pension problems, potholes, and much, much more. Call me, Madam Fix It, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, right here on WESN. Let me fix it for you.
Is it politics? What is it? Is it that nobody cares about sports?
The kind of support that sport used to get in the past is no longer here.
The thing is, taking a knee doesn't mean that that's the only thing you're doing now, Andre.
Right.
Taking a knee along with other stuff.
Samantha, what are you looking forward to when you return home to Trinidad and Tobago after winning the title?
Thank you very much for speaking it into existence.
Is it no pressure on Nicholas Ball?
It makes me more motivated to work hard and to go out there and rep the red, white and black.
Why are we sending a team to the Winter Olympics?
There are a number of Trinbagonians who are in the diaspora and have grown up in winter sport. It's an opportunity that the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee will not close the door on.
I also believe in the players that we have. Once you can motivate the players, you can get the best out of them.
Well, VSEP has cost the taxpayers 10 billion, sorry, not even 10 billion. I was thinking of Carney 1975 Limited actually. In 2019, then Chairman Mr. Hospitalis indicated that they've actually spent thus far $10 billion to wrap up the company. When BWI was closing down, there was a reinvestment of $100 million just to try and get the fleet and stuff back up, with $250 million to close down BWIA. And then you take a look at WESN, or the Water and Sewerage Authority, and $600 million for VSEP as well. And by the way, Karen, I'm very glad before the break that you brought up the difference between retrenchment and visa. People might not entirely understand that. So, Karen, before we come to you, Kemuel, this situation now with visa, not only has it cost taxpayers billions of dollars, but in my opinion, this alone should have been an exposure to governments, past and present, that they just couldn't manage. They didn't have a clue about how to manage many of these enterprises and entities.
And that's essentially what we saw then and what we're seeing now, and we continue to see the same thing. And it's like as you're saying, they have not been able to learn from their mistakes in the past. In fact, carrying 1975 Limited, they are still to pay out. That's ongoing. In fact, Minister Hossain, the Minister of Agriculture, would have stated that right in May of this year that there are still people who are outstanding in terms of their packages. So it's something that we continue to not learn from.
We can't even manage VSEP.
And we essentially want to do the same thing with WASA.
Yeah, essentially. Karen, VSEP, retrenchment, the Water and Sewerage Authority. The last company to close down with VSEP was Petrotrin. That cost $1.8 billion. The next company is WASA, and then there's the Port Authority, and then there's Lake Asphalt. Well, their future hangs in the balance.
Yeah, so, you know, you can't, again, this is me taking the bigger picture sort of thing. You can't look at VSEP and oral retention, which is both connected, because it's separation. Both of them one is called separation, one is called termination. And in both instances, there is going to be a payout. Okay, so that is the similarity between the two, but it comes out of a restructuring exercise, because in most instances, when you're dealing with state enterprises, that is a major issue to getting it right, to be starting, at least to stop hemorrhaging money, but at least to start the process. That's not the only thing they're doing, but certainly the labor costs add up. And when you have an institution which is, you have too many workers, and a lot of times, for both administrations, it's a way of getting political patronage. It's a way of getting, when it's time for things to voting to happen. It is understood whether it is wrong, but it is something. And what's the big difference? VSEP is voluntary. When you're dealing with retrenchment and you're dealing with unions and you're dealing with collective agreements, I think the case that was the seminal case on retrenchment happened with, I think it was ArcelorMittal. I think that may have been the case.
Back in 2016.
Where they went through the whole process of retrenchment. And retrenchment is not an easy thing, especially when it forms part of a collective agreement, which it would in all these cases. It's first in, last out, but it's not that. You have to meet with the union, then you have to decide giving them alternative employment, and if the alternative employment is not equal to what they enjoyed previously, it becomes very, very difficult and very, very prolonged, and it becomes very contentious. VSEP is what it says, voluntary separation. So what it does allow for many persons, especially those coming to the end of their career, which is probably the persons you want to replace with new blood, it allows them to go home with an enhanced package, and it allows them to come forward and say, yes, I will take it. They'll go and build up a business, because when they walk off with this, they're not paying taxes on it. And when they use it to build a business, it might not succeed, but it's far less combative. It is far less contentious. And it's for many people who probably would not be in the first in, last out, last in, first out, which is all things being equal, have qualified for retrenchment, and they probably want to leave because they don't want to, if they resign, they get nothing. So VSEP is a way of reducing your staff in a less contentious manner and allowing those persons to go back, give them an enhanced package to add as a little sweetener for them to take it. So I think that's the main difference, but it comes out of overstaffing. Now, sometimes overstaffing, maybe I don't know that enough about TSTT's issues, but certainly part of TSTT, and has always been an issue with overstaffing, having 5 people doing the same job. But I think it's the technology is a challenge to them with WhatsApp. They're certainly not making the income they used to make, and there may be a lot of other things I am positive that I don't know about. When it comes to WASA, there was a VSEP offered under, I believe it was under Pandya administration, because they were looking for a loan, and the loan from an international entity, and one of the conditions was they had to reduce their staffing by 25%, and they used the VSEP mechanism, and they were able to achieve that. But the problems, as I said, we tend to focus on that because I guess people say, yes, these companies are overstaffed and there's a lot of political hacks there. Yeah, that might be true. But if I look at WASA, the fact, with all due respect to Marvin Gonzalez, the minister, it's not anything personal, as I always say. But my goodness, you've had a revolving door of CEOs. You have had something is wrong with getting it right there. And as I had told you before, Keaton, when I spoke to someone who I knew was well versed in the area, they said to me with the 7 trend, when the PNM ministry lost its elections, it had already secured 1.6 billion in loans from Citibank. Now, they hadn't drawn down on it, but it had gotten it, and they had already done a survey of the entire island to exactly every kilometer of pipe that had to be replaced. And so they knew exactly, because that's a major part of it is the leakage. And when the government changed, they ordered the steel pipes. I hear there are 2 or 3 places in particular that were mentioned to me where there are thousands of these steel pipes just sitting at the side of the road for years and years, and nothing being done. They decided to not go that way, but rather to go the Disalcott way. And just to say this, I mean, this government, I'm sorry, you've been there 7 years. You've said that the problem, in addition to overstaffing, which you're trying to deal with, is also the leakage of the pipes. Don't you have pipes sitting on there? Why don't you use them? They already did this survey. I was given on very, very, very impeccable source that every inch of Trinidad and Tobago had been surveyed for where pipes needed to be replaced. So it's not only overstaffing, it's also the distribution, which is the pipe. And why haven't you used those pipes? And the other point that was raised to me was with regards to production of water. And what I don't understand, in the 7 years with the 7 trend, which I think you're familiar with, 7 trend coming in with the former, under PNM, Pandya's administration, to provide them with a certain kind of water, which would then be better suited for the industrial estate. Because WASA would buy the water from Disalcott, and then WASA would sell it to police and make a good, they would make a sufficient profit. But it was take or pay. So whether you use it or not, you had to pay for it. So that's when it started supplying it to the domestic market. Did that act as to discourage fixing the leaks when you were getting the water anyhow from Disalcott? And then the plan was, let me just say for the public, to put in a number of Disalcott smaller plants, desalination plants, because I learned this, and I'm sure people may not know this, when I was told about the distribution point being so critical. I was told that the Point 14 gets its water all the way from the Carney Arena, and it's so far away. I said, why is that so far, coming from such a far distance? Said because the water in Point 14 is brackish, it's not potable. So the fact was to put in a Disalcott plant there that would provide water, and then so it's a combination of increased production through the Disalcott plants that they were going to put up in areas where they were going to industrialize, because Point 14 was going to have the aluminum plant. So it would have they'd use the same model that the government had used for Point Lisas, and implement it in the east to northwest, all the areas that they were going to have industrialization. So it's a distribution issue, it's a distribution issue, it's also a production issue. And the last point I want to make in relation to that, because I think the public need to know this, and I've gotten it from an impeccable source, is that lack of discipline. And what I was told, I remember in 2009, I was in government, and I remember things were so bad that we were thinking of bringing in water from Dominica. It was that bad.
Wow.
And because the government had to be disciplined and increase the policing and all of that, the Reno Dam that usually you needed 75 million, whatever, to feed all these different areas of the country, we were able more or less to do that with 35 million, which meant that a lot of the tanks were overflowing, a lack of discipline, which came in because of the policing, the fact that we haven't done all of that. So, you know, it's a big problem.
Very much so. And with about 3 minutes left, Kemuel, everything that Karen has mentioned, when you reflected that back in 2009, things were so bad that the government was actually thinking of bringing water into Dominica. Imagine the situation now seems to be worse, actually, than in 2009. And yet still somehow, I can't even say people are surviving. I'm still seeing reports of people being without water for weeks, for months here in Trinidad. And if we're striving for first world status and the economy is doing so great and this government is the best and we give them 10 out of 10 according to one public relations officer, why not address those issues as well, you know? But yes, sorry Kemuel, I just wanted to state that in any organization, if a person is found guilty of misconduct and then deliberate misconduct, they are dismissed. In fact, they can even be taken to court for such. In the instance of governments past and present, and let's take a look at the last 7 years, if even under the People's Partnership, if the pipes were just left, a survey was done or whatnot, it means that they deliberately did not do the work, because all the work was done for them.
And that's it. That's where disposal of public property and procurement comes in, because of the fact that these pipes would have been purchased for a particular purpose, and now they are just left there. Who are the people responsible for purchasing those pipes? Why were the pipes not laid or whatever needed to be done with them? That's where these things comes in. So it's a matter of these pipes will just stay there, rot, eventually they would be unusable, and we just have to do over the entire thing again. And that's where we see wastage in government money and lack of management.
So not only is there a wastage of water resources, there's a wastage of fund as well, because as Karen mentioned, a survey was done, a survey was completed, the pipes were procured, nothing actually ever came out of it.
A lack of discipline.
And yes, a lack of discipline. So as much as I agree, ladies and gentlemen, that please, you know, do not waste water at home. You see it on your water bill every month. A leaking tap can throw away so many gallons of water per day. You know, don't wash your car with a hose. Be absolutely careful in terms of your water tanks. You see, the messaging is clear. The messaging we understand, and we should be disciplined. But the messaging is not effective when you see water pipelines throughout the country constantly leaking water, water pipelines flooding streets, overflowing. So much so that even at my parents' home, a water line burst, was flooding our driveway at night, actually. And that could have caused structural damage to properties, caused structural damage to the roads involved. And even so, the other issue that WASA has to address, because we have to go for news now, it just pops in my head. You see WASA and their inability to control water pressure. Boy, that has cost people a lot of money. So people can't get water, but people who are privileged enough to have a water supply get a pressure that is so strong that I think you're going to need new pipes every 6 months to a year. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be right back after WESN's News on the Hour.
with your WESN News on the Hour. I am Denise St. Clair. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. Most areas restored following electricity outage in 30% of the nation. TNTech Corporate Communications says citizens not out of the woods yet. Child in critical condition following shooting that left one man dead. And internationally, UK inflation exceeds 10% as bread and milk prices soar. Now for the details. The public is advised that as at 1:05 this morning, with the exception of a small segment at St. Lucian Road and environs in Diego Martin, all customers who were impacted by the large area outage stemming from the failure of a critical 220 kilovolts transmission tower in Rosilac are now back on supply. At approximately 7 p.m., a major disturbance was experienced on the system after a landslide caused the tower to shift, putting excess strain on the transmission lines, which led to a break in the tower and the lines. The affected line brings power from the TGU plant in La Brea to the rest of the grid. Additional generators were brought online by the independent power producers to restore supply to the approximately 30% of the customers in Trinidad who were affected. Rolling load shedding may be instituted this morning as the use of electricity increases. TNTech Corporate Communications Manager Annabelle Brasnell says citizens are not out of the woods yet. Speaking on WESN's AM Prime, she called on persons to conserve their electricity as she says load shedding is expected.
Because that segment of the line is compromised and we're not getting as much power as we can out of the plant in La Brea, we actually are in a situation where we have to ask customers to conserve electricity today. The name of the game this morning is conservation, because we want to avoid having to do rolling blackouts or rolling load shedding as the morning goes forward. And so if customers conserve electricity by not using bigger appliances such as your AC units, that's a major user of electricity. AC units, dryers. If you don't use that, then it means that we have available capacity for more customers to be able to stay on supply.
A shooting in Morvant last night has left one man dead and a child in critical condition. According to a Newsday report, the 49-year-old Morvant man was killed when a gunman chased him, shooting two children and another man in the process. Around 7 p.m., officers responded to a report and found Eusebio Roberts with multiple gunshot wounds. The Monrepo man was taken to the Port of Spain General Hospital, where he was declared dead. Police said two children were also shot, including a 9-year-old who was shot in the head and is listed in a critical condition at the Port of Spain General Hospital. On to international news now. Inflation in the United Kingdom hit a new 40-year high last month, rising above 10% for the first time since 1982 and piling further pain on households already struggling to pay their bills. Annual consumer price inflation hit 10.1% in July, according to data published by the Office for National Statistics on Wednesday, up from 9.4% in June. Soaring food prices up 12.7% since July 2021 were the largest single contributor to the acceleration in inflation, the ONS said. Well, that was your news to the hour on WESN. I am Denise St. Clair. Thanks for watching. Get ready for an explosion of music an August evening at La Jolla Auditorium, featuring Leandra, Tricanal, David Barreau and Marva, Nathaniel, and from Tobago, John Arnold and Lynette Lewis. August 20th, $250. La Jolla Auditorium from 6 p.m. For more info, call 747-4289 or 262-2584.
Welcome back to Talking Points. Sometimes between commercial breaks, and we do thank our head of news, Denise St. Clair, and Marquis Akers for news. But sometimes the conversation actually continues way conversation continues. I wonder where I stole that from. It continues way into the topic beyond what we concluded, and I think Karen raised a very valuable point. We actually took the conversation in relation to dismissal and mismanagement back to the unions, and Karen mentioned something called natural justice. Kemel, the law is really a pain sometimes, isn't it?
Well, that's it, and you would be surprised as to how you may view things in a particular way, and then when you actually go to court or you actually read the law, you see it's something completely different. So we were mentioning firing someone, but it's not as simple as it seems.
And I never really understood. You have a lack of laws, or a lack of implementation of laws, then you have weak laws, then you have laws that are so open to interpretation, which is basically what a lawyer is to do. They are to interpret the law and argue on behalf of it or their client. And then all these factors coming to law, and then you have laws that just don't make sense at all to me. So Karen, being an attorney at law yourself and an author, as well as a teacher who has taught many people who've appeared on this program, I take my hats off to you, because I'd be frustrated just trying to understand why it is that laws are just, well, they're a headache.
Well, law is dynamic and responds to society. For example, it seems like I'm going on a tangent, like the rape laws. You can't put in evidence a person past sexual conduct, and that is what they did to women a lot. And so they were victimized even before they stood a chance, and the law has changed, so you can't really take position, and the laws have a reason. Now, when you had mentioned before we went off was that you can dismiss a worker. It's not that easy, and that is the point. The reason is because you have an act, and the act is the Industrial Relations Act, and the Industrial Relations Act was became after the Industrial Stabilization Act, which was seen as a political tool because the Minister of Labor plays such an important role in terms of hiring and termination. And before that, you had the riot Butler, the riots, and so on. Workers were really treated badly, and so you seem to have gone full circle. And that is why when they passed the act, they called it the Schlumberger case, a piece of social engineering. So the bottom line is this: just as how you can find someone, you saw someone shoot someone, you cannot take that person and go and hang them the next day, can you? Mm-hmm. Even if you saw him shoot the man, you still have to give him his day in court. And therefore, the Industrial Relations Act says, as a classic case when A.G. Wooding was our Chief Justice, Fernandez is still a case. Even before the Industrial Relations Act, they caught the man in the act of stealing the rum. There wasn't any question he wasn't stealing it, and they fired him on the spot. And he challenged it, and the Chief Justice said, "You have breach of natural justice. A person has a right to be heard." So when you read just the last point, when you look at the Industrial Relations Act, you see that section 10.4, a dismissal can be lawful, but if it is harsh and oppressive and not in keeping with good industrial relations practices, then the court will intervene and provide that person with relief. So one of the ways is that you better give them their day in court. You give them opportunity to be heard, do proper investigation, let them answer the thing, do all of that before you say, okay, you're terminated. Because if you don't do that, you will find yourself having to pay damages, and it costs him nothing, because even if he's not in a union, he can join a union under the Industrial Relations Act.
Yes, yeah.
So unions are powerful.
Very much so, very powerful, and what is more powerful than power itself? What is the true power, I suppose, is influence, and the level of influence that you can have. That, to me, is the true power, and in that instance, that is what we're seeing with the unions. Ladies and gentlemen, the phone lines are now open. You can call in and join us on Talking Point this morning. Karen, Kemuel, and Keaton, we're here with you. If there's any comments that you'd like to make, any questions you'd like to ask, we are open to that. But we'd love to hear from you, your thoughts and opinions. Going back to what Karen just mentioned in relation to natural justice, a fair day in court. I understand and I respect. Sometimes I truly I'm a bit frustrated, I suppose, given the example that's used with Fernandez, because if I blatantly see somebody stealing, right, I know it's a criminal offense. It's a criminal offense. Why is it that he can't be dismissed? Because there's a breach of national justice, there's the Industrial Relations Court and the Industrial Relations Act, and you see, this is where I have a respect for the law, but at the same time, it could make me a little sick sometimes.
Well, that's the whole thing about it. Innocent until proven guilty. So you can actually see someone commit murder, have video evidence of them actually committing the murder, positively identify them as being the person. It could be with a legal firearm, and their prints are on the shells and everything. Then you carry this to court, and the court says something completely different. So, I mean,
my next question would
have... This court sounds so irresponsible, because people have diminished responsibility, the insanity, which is McNaughton rules, that that is a test of how you determine legal insanity as opposed to medical insanity. I know in England they have the coercive behavior. Not all death killings are equal. That's why there's manslaughter, involuntary manslaughter, and there's murder. So sometimes a lawyer will always tell his client to shut your mouth, because you might be sinking. Yes, but you're sinking yourself, not understanding that the court may say that there was provocation.
Yeah.
A woman.
But Karen, sorry, we have a caller, but in relation to what you're stating, I have a question to ask. I'm going to put forward something, and hopefully we can have some understanding this morning. But we have a caller with us from St. James. Good morning, caller.
Yes, good morning to KKK.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I have two questions.
Sure.
One, with all this industrial relations activities going on in the country now, we are not hearing from the Minister of Labor.
Does he still exist?
Number two, is the Tobago East and Tobago West representatives, are they of any interest now? Are they of any value? We're not hearing from them. What's going on? Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much, caller. You've raised a valuable point, because with respect to Stephen McClashy, the last time I heard from him was months ago in relation to digital COVID-19 vaccination cards, as well as a COVID-19 workplace policy.
Which he never implemented.
That never came through. He said it is about 2 weeks until it is completed, and then we could reveal it to the public. You never heard from Stephen McClashy. So as far as I'm concerned, Stephen McClashy sit down in his chair, knocking back, and just really enjoying the salary and the benefits he gets.
Maybe he's told to be quiet. No.
Karen,
in politics, he may be told to be quiet.
If he is told to be quiet, Karen, then it just makes no sense having him there.
I mean, as a Minister of Labor. But I do agree with Karen,
not from his point of view.
You have seen that from many government ministers, not just between 2015 and 2020, but also now. It seems like there's been a gag order on them. Don't speak about something. You see for a fact that there are certain ministers who would come out boldly and speak. The Minister of National Security, people like Stuart Young, Camille Robinson, Regis, those people. I think but there are some ministers you just don't hear from.
I think Fitzgerald Hines should be given a gag order. But from the Prime Minister. But overall, in relation to that, I guess there's no democracy within the Parliament itself, if that is the case. If it is as me as a minister, I cannot report to the public. That is a huge conflict in itself. So very disappointing. With respect to the representatives from Tobago East and Tobago West, well, we heard from Tobago West recently, who indicated, that's Shamfa Kujo.
Yes,
she said that our voices in Parliament ensuring that the people of Tobago are heard. Well, I hate to break it to you, but people in Tobago might actually disagree with what you're stating. When we just take a look, because in your constituency, Shamfa Kucho, if your voice is allowing the people of Tobago to be heard, I haven't really heard from you as yet in relation to what took place last week at the A&R Robinson International Airport expansion. And Camille is about to correct me on that.
Yes, because she did respond yesterday. In fact, she responded on the day of the night of last Friday night to say that some of these people were paid out since how many ever years ago, and their families didn't.
Well, I'm aware of that. And the reason why I said I didn't hear much from her is because the families, as well as those on behalf of the families, there was one particular movement with respect to fair negotiations and fair pay. They stated that, yes, the Member of Parliament has stated this, yes, the Minister of Finance has stated this. However, that is inaccurate. You know, they stated that, listen, okay, houses were built. What they're paying us can't even pay back for that house. The house has no electricity, it has no water connection. We don't even know if the deeds to this house are going to be in their name. So that's what I mean. I haven't heard much from her. It's easy to come and respond and say, well, these people were paid off, you know, but are their voices really being heard?
We do have a call on the line. Shogunas, good morning.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Hey, good morning, Professor.
I am sorry to miss yesterday.
Yes, we're sorry we missed you too.
Yes, remember about a week ago you had some experts there and I queried them on things like sugar welfare. You say you would send it to them. Did you do it or you give up on that?
I've spoken to them since, but no, I will admit to you that it's my fault. I actually forgot.
But do we expect a response?
Yes. No, I will talk to them again now that you've reminded me, so forgive me. Yes.
Yesterday, when I look at your repeat, I see Cabinet is going to interview people for scrap iron license.
Yes, export licenses.
That is the very basis of government. Cabinet is an oversight body.
Correct.
Right? That is for the public service to do, and then the Cabinet is the one would be represent the oversight. Right? How could that happen? I would like to hear your permanent guess on that. Talking about public service salaries. I have explained this to you hundreds of times, that government do not collect their revenue, they destroy their revenue base and whatnot. And finally, on WASA. I have explained to you, I mean, Karen gave a good resume, but I think we missed out two major points. Because she mentioned they was going to do the desalination for industrial purposes. Because when people queried about replacing the line, they said that was a cheaper process. Somewhere along the line, it went out to be producing potable water, and that have never been explained. That obviously is clear malfeasance of justice. When they did go to replace the lines, normally with WASA and predecessors for 100 years, would have had an inside body replacing these lines. The government put their partners as contractors at exorbitant rates, and the whole thing busts, and Karen is right. There are these pipes all over. If you want to see, I could show you a pile, hundreds of those pipes just packed up there. And instead of replacing that, because she also right with the WASA business, WASA mapped all those plants in the 1960s. Because I mentioned to you, there was the first people in Trinidad who were going for GIS. And that is when they did those pipes. And all they have to do is go and replace those pipes. Instead, we still putting up new desalination plants and new plants around the place. Thank you, gentlemen.
Can I just respond to that?
Yes. Thank you very much, Professor.
Just very quickly. Two, I think that it's not that initial plan I was talking about. Just under the Manning administration, they had done a more detailed, they went through every inch and every kilometer of pipeline in Trinidad and Tobago, and they knew exactly where the leakage was, and which is why they were able to secure a 1.6 billion loan from Citibank, but they lost elections. So it was not a question that they were relying, because from 1960 something to then, there would have been more leaks developing. So they had a very updated one. So my criticism is, if that plan had been initiated under a PNM administration and they'd done all the work, why in the 7 years, at least while you deal with other issues for the WASA, why aren't you dealing with that? So don't just tell me about VSEP. Do you have not been laying plans? Secondly, the Digicel thing, which I have myself questioned, part of it is to reduce the distribution lines from like currently to Point 14 and
Karen,
industrialization.
If you can just hold on that point, please. I'm so sorry to cut you across, but we have a caller on the line with us from San Fernando. Good morning, caller.
Good morning, gentlemen and Karen.
Good morning.
Good
morning. You called 4 entities earlier.
Yes.
You, 3 of those entities were takeovers by the government. Currently, 1975 Limited came from State and Lyle. You had BWIA, which was formed in 1939 or 40, somewhere around there.
Went to Cal,
yes. Took over, and then you had the Texaco refinery, which eventually became Trintoc and Petrotrin.
Yes.
WASA was the only one that the government had formed. But the issue is, all 4 of those entities has shown that the government of Trinidad and Tobago cannot run these size of enterprises.
Yes.
Because what happens is they have been, if you look back at the issue, they have been taken over. They have overstaffed them. This is a government thing. They have overstaffed them while not being able to manage them. So they become these crazy, uncontrollable entities that only hemorrhaging money from the state, and we end up in these situations.
Yes.
I remember Karen was a part of a government, a prime minister, who prior to Karen joining the government, when in his first term, he said WASA was a $27 billion headache. Back in 91 to 92 to 95, he said that. Prior to that, he was against, let's say Mr. Manning was against the cell cut issue, because when Pandy was talking about that, Mr. Manning came on the television as the opposition leader and opposed that, saying that we have enough water in the country, we just have to manage it. Well, up to today, we still ain't doing that.
No, we're not.
And the issue is, our issue is, our citizens, because those places aren't being run by foreigners, you know. Those places are run by people of Trinidad and Tobago. And they go in there and they do not do what they're supposed to do, because everybody's looking for a payday and nobody wants to do their job.
Can I just make one comment on that?
Thank you very much, caller.
I have to on Currently Limited.
Go ahead,
because I was not around in the early days, which I would not say that I won't take responsibility. But between 2007 and 10, I was there, and that is when the EU preferential treatment for our sugar and the Eastern Caribbean bananas came to an end, and we had to compete. And the reality was that when under PN administration, and I think Dr. Rowley was Minister of Agriculture, Currently Limited, they paid out after they had cleared off all their debt, they end up paying $5 billion to try to keep Currently Limited afloat. And you could not. The economies of scale of Brazil, the economies of scale of Asia, our sugar was not competitive. And to bring in combined harvesters and technology means that you're looking at unemploying a vast number of people, which have political ramifications and so on. So with the Currently Limited, I have to say that decision and the issues with that had to do with the fact that the company kept on running up huge bill because you're keeping it non-mechanized. And when they eventually closed it down with the EU, the sugar workers said that money belonged to them. So I wanted to ask them if all the oil money belonged to us. So what I would say in conclusion, issues are not as simple as you are making them out to be. I am not saying that overstaffing is not part of it. I am not one who decries our ability to manage things. We certainly did a better job that the colonial masters did, and we have done for our own health and education, even though it's not the best. Look at what's happening in England. Look what's happening in the States. For a small little country, I think we did quite well. So stop decrying everything about our country. We have a lot of work to do, but it's not as simple as you're making it out to be, and it's a bit too harsh in your criticism, I have to say.
Karen, we do have a caller from Claxton Bay. Claxton Bay, good morning.
Hello, good morning, caller.
Yeah, morning to the panel there.
Good morning, Mr. Fisherman.
Yeah, on the protest in Claxton Bay.
Yes, the scrap iron dealers.
Blocking the road and inconveniencing the public, the working class. But when we had, as fishermen was protesting for the extra steel plant and the seismic, we used to go to the heart of the source. We, for instance, when the seismic was doing seismic outside Labrador, we blocked the seismic road. We went to the source. We didn't block the road to inconvenience people. When they want to put down the boat by the mango, they show you a mango, we blocked the workers that was going to the mango to do the testing. And when we was doing the seismic protesting for the Spain, we had our boats in the water around the Hyatt. And the water, we didn't inconvenience nobody, the public. So when you protest, you go to the source. We went to EMA fishing or EMA office, I think that's why we went block the fish.
Oh, okay.
We didn't block the road, only to inconvenience people. You understand? I'll just know.
Yeah. I understand what you're stating, caller. Thank you very much, by the way, for raising that, because oftentimes we speak about protests and how it disrupts society. I think that's a whole point, actually, that you want to disrupt our livelihoods. Well, we're going to disrupt society. It's unfortunate, Mr. Fisherman, but that's what we've come to, and I'll be very honest with you, sir. I am so sorry that you are affected by this, but I don't think it's going to ease up anytime soon. It most likely will get worse.
And you see, that's the point that I was making yesterday. You now have a cabinet subcommittee who already have different portfolios, who are already ministers and MPs, and they are now the ones tasked with the responsibility to go through these things and say whether they would allow these companies to export scrap iron.
Well, if it is you have a Minister of National Security that has not one clue about what to do, you have a Minister of Trade and Industry who might actually quite like, who knows the definition of inflation very well.
You're too funny, you know.
Well, listen, Karen, they know the dictionary definitions very well. They just don't know what to do about it.
Oh, God.
What makes me think that they're actually going to work in favor of those? I think that it's another scheme. There's always a motive behind the decision, and I wouldn't be entirely surprised if we certain few benefit from those in the cabinet subcommittee. But I just want to quickly go back to the call from San Fernando when you said that these are state entities that the government really couldn't manage, and we just had workers. The definition of job creation, according to a political party, is taking an entity that was efficient and probably profitable and stuffing people in that entity in positions that do not need to be created, in positions that are basically, and we're going to pay them a salary. Basically, their job is redundant. The title of their job is sometimes funnier, the titles the people have for these jobs. They're getting a salary. That's their definition. So we're going to make an entity unprofitable, inefficient. That's job creation according to political party. So caller from San Fernando, I hear you. I agree with you. As far as I'm concerned, I wouldn't even give the government the job to manage a headache. They're just better at creating it rather. Although I wouldn't be surprised, they're actually better at shutting down
You
things.
need to be a stand-up comedian, Keaton. I really think you have to be. You are.
Anyway, Karen,
after Ronald McDonald, I can't get that out of my mind.
Well, Karen, just before we conclude, Mr. Pascal, I believe that you have a show with us later on.
Yes, I do, and this morning we will be speaking about agriculture, and we have the head of the Agricultural Society of Trinidad and Tobago, Mr. Darrell Rampasad. So we are looking at the challenges facing the sector and what are the possible solutions that they have proffered to the government. So let's see how that
Well, I look forward to that conversation. I had a preview of it on our social media pages yesterday, and very much so agriculture at the forefront. So Kemil 1-on-1 at 10 a.m. Looking forward to that, so thank you very much, sir. Ms. Karen Nunes Teixeira, your presence, though you were away, you made the effort to come here, your dedication, and very much your commitment to Talking Point. Well, we very much appreciate it. Thank you.
You're more than welcome. I always enjoy. You see what Kenyon said? He says on Wednesday, he sees me smiling all the time. So that's a reflection on my co-host, and I enjoy being with them. We always make it worthwhile for the listener, I think.
We certainly do. And Mr. Pascal, multiple rules that you're juggling, but thank you very much for your presence, and
thank you
I look forward to continue conversation.
Thank you. Certainly.
And Sean, don't worry, I miss you too, huh?
Sean,
I miss you.
Keep well, get better. But I'm hearing the directors telling me, Keaton, that's all the time we have. I'm Keaton Shaw. This has been Talking Point. Remember, as ironic as it may be, today's a good day to have a good day, and we will see you again tomorrow morning. Bye-bye.
WESN